The Seahawks fell just short of their preseason opener, a 32-25 loss to the Steelers, but there was plenty to be excited about on the offensive side of the football. Nick Lee and I are going to be breaking it all down on our Monday installment of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, your host for Locked On Seahawks, back after a 5-day hiatus. Decided to put a ring on it this weekend and got that taken care of. Really had a great time. Fantastic day at Gorge Crest Vineyards, outstanding facility. So really excited to have an awesome wedding, family and friends around. Nick, unfortunately, I had to invite you. So you were one of our groomsmen, but really excited about that. And what I'm really most excited about, though, I've had 4.5 days without football, Nick. And after about 3 days, it started to really become a problem. So we are back here on Locked On Seahawks, our Monday episode. Finally, an opportunity for you and I to tackle the preseason opener on Saturday night. The Seahawks came up just short, but wins and losses in the preseason don't matter. It's really looking at individual players, and there was a lot to be excited about coming out of this game. So we're going to be looking at the offensive side of the football today, some key takeaways, as well as our 3-up, 3-down segment, which offensive players helped their cause, which ones didn't help their cause in this preseason opener. A lot of analysis coming your way here on our Monday edition. Now for your lead story here on Locked On Seahawks. Before we get to Saturday's preseason opener, this time of year, Nick, there's not normally a lot of trades. You usually have to wait till the end of the month when teams are trying to get their rosters down to 53 players and you see some swaps. But occasionally there will be a trade midway through camp, and the Seahawks happen to be involved in one of them today, sending cornerback Ugo Amadi to the Philadelphia Eagles for receiver Gega Whiteside. And Nick, some of our listeners may know that name because, unfortunately for Philadelphia, they picked him a few picks before DK Metcalf went to the Seahawks in the 2019 draft. And he's got 16 catches for 290 yards and a touchdown in his resume in 3 full seasons. It didn't work out, but now the Seahawks are going to see if maybe a change of scenery can turn things around for a player that certainly got some talent.
Yeah, my dad's from Philly. My two brothers are really big Eagles fans. He is most famous for the guy they took instead of DK Metcalf in Eagles land. That is what Gega Whiteside is known for, unfortunately. But now they're both on the same team, at least temporarily. For this, the Eagles desperately needed a wide receiver back then. Chose him, obviously, selected the wrong one, and at least for now, Metcalf and Gega Whiteside are on the same team. And I thought it was interesting, Corbin, that Gega Whiteside actually switched to tight end this offseason and into training camp. He's been taking snaps at tight end. They liked his versatility. And from what I've read, the Seahawks mostly view him as a receiver. I think he was originally listed at 6'2", 225. And this camp, the roster that the Eagles put out, he was at 6'2", 237. So he put on just over 10 pounds. So assuming, expecting that tight end role. So I think the Seahawks maybe like that. We know that Pete Carroll and the staff enjoy the versatility. I know that they might view him more as a receiver. I think there might be a bit more room in the receiver area, but honestly, not much on either side. This is very much an audition. Nothing absolutely is guaranteed with our Gega Whiteside. It's going to be an audition. It's going to be a battle. Obviously, you got Metcalf and Lockett up top. And as far as size goes, Tyler Mabry's, I think, the next smallest tight end at 6'3", 247. So he's got 1 inch and 10 pounds on our Gega Whiteside. So I think he's very much a receiver in this system. And with you got Metcalf, Lockett, you got Eskridge is still trying to get back on the field. D. Eskridge, the second rounder from last year. Derek Young, we're going to talk a bit about him. He's certainly got some momentum. Bo Melton, too. They like what they got. And don't forget about Freddie Swain, Penny Hart. Unfortunately, Cody Thompson just went on IR. But that receiver room is pretty crowded, and it gets crowded more with our Gega Whiteside. And this is very much an audition. Absolutely nothing is guaranteed to him.
Yeah, this is one of those classic mid-training camp flyers on a former high draft pick that just didn't work out with his original team. And I can tell you, our Gega Whiteside was a player the Seahawks were very high on coming out of Stanford in that 2019 draft. Now, obviously, they're thrilled they got DK Metcalf instead, but this is a guy with his size at 6'2", 237. That's a big-bodied receiver, but that's a smaller tight end, especially for the way the Seahawks use their tight ends. I can't see them listing him as a tight end. Maybe that's what they'll choose to do. If that's the case, he's going to have to try to surpass Tyler Mabry on this depth chart, as you mentioned. There is no guarantee. In fact, I would say that he is somewhat a long shot here to make this roster, but I think the bigger storyline here is who the Seahawks traded away to get him, because this looks like one of those classic trades where it's two teams that have a player that they're just looking to move on from. And they're swapping, seeing if the guy they get back in return can make their football team. And Ugo Amadi, unfortunately, despite the fact the last 3 years that he stepped in 2 of those seasons and played a lot of snaps for an injured Marquise Blair, he's played a lot in the slot, he's played some safety, he's been a really good special teams player. He was down at the bottom of the depth chart all of training camp. He was playing almost exclusively with the third team defense. And I remember watching some of these practices and feeling like he's in the last year of his rookie contract. He's not getting reps at slot corner to speak of. He's playing as a third team safety. That cannot be good for his prognosis moving into this season. And sure enough, the Seahawks decided to ship him out of town. That tells you that they think Justin Coleman's potentially going to be making this football team, Marquise Blair playing the slot. And really, maybe the bigger storyline here, Nick, just the style defense they're going to be playing. You expect you're going to see Josh Jones, a healthy Ryan Neal, both those guys on the field as third safeties, maybe even fourth safeties, with Sean Desai being involved. I just don't know that they're going to use a traditional slot corner as much as maybe they've done in the past. If they do, they're comfortable with Justin Coleman or Marquise Blair playing that role, and they're going to be mixing in those other safeties as the third and fourth defensive backs. And so scheme change, it just wasn't a good fit anymore. Wasn't having a great training camp either. End of the rookie deal. Let's just see if we can get somebody else in return for him in Gega Whiteside that maybe, just maybe, can still be a good addition to this football team, just getting out of Philadelphia and getting a fresh start.
Yeah, both teams, it could be a classic change of scenery. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke and say Gega Whiteside is going to make this team and make a big splash this year, especially given the situation at quarterback that the Seahawks have. But for Ugo Amadi, I'm not going to kick a guy out the door. Certainly he made some impact plays and it was a versatile player, but with the fit, the defensive scheme, a 5'9", 200-pound guy, it doesn't have the size for, the big nickel, the third safety, that the Seahawks might want to run this year. So, just the fit wasn't there, and the two sides just met up and made a deal and swapped flyers pretty much. And there's no guarantee, obviously, that Ugo Amadi is going to make the Eagles. I think, I'm just getting some insider info from my brother and my dad. They're really looking for anything to bolster that defense. They're really excited about the defense with the draft picks, but Ugo Amadi certainly is going to get a shot. He definitely will get more of a shot, and I think both sides thought the guy they're getting has at least a better shot at fitting their current system than the guy they gave away.
Yeah, and these are both guys that are at the end of their rookie contracts, and so if you end up not liking what you see, you can just cut bait, and there's a chance the Seahawks might have done that with Ugo Amadi anyway, given the secondary depth that they have at safety and at corner. He might not have made this football team anyway. So why not trade him for another guy at a different position that maybe, just maybe, if you kick the tires just right, can contribute for you and maybe be a surprise. If not, nothing lost. You would have released the player that you traded for him probably anyway. So this is a true, audition. It's a true opportunity for a player like Gega Whiteside to try to show he can make it work with another team. The Seahawks, they're not going to be looking for him to necessarily jump in and be a star, but maybe, just maybe, he can make things work out. As you mentioned, there were a few other moves today. Cody Thompson going on injured reserve with a shoulder injury, so he is done for the 2022 season, will not be making the 53-man roster. He was injured while run blocking early in Saturday's preseason game. And Seattle's down to 86 players. They will not have to make another move because one of those is Aaron Donkor, and they have an exemption on him. But the players they waived today: cornerback Josh Valentine-Turner, defensive tackle Antonio Valentino, guard Eric Wilson, and receiver Deontez Alexander. So again, those 4 players being waived, and Cody Thompson going to injured reserve. The Seahawks are down to 86 players, with one of them being an exempt list player in Aaron Donkor. So they won't have to make any more moves before tomorrow's deadline. They are down to the effective number of players for their second preseason game that'll be coming up on Thursday. Before we move forward to that second preseason game against the Bears, we haven't talked about the first preseason game yet, and I'll take the blame for that with my wedding happening this past weekend. But certainly I wouldn't have changed anything that happened the last 4 days. Nick and I are going to be breaking down everything that took place on the offensive side of the football in Saturday's preseason opener when we return. Life can be full of challenges. Recently, I made a difficult decision to resign from a job, and fortunately, I had quality people around me to talk things through with when I needed it most and help me make the right decision for myself and my family. But that's not always the case, and life can be full of twists and turns, so it's important to show yourself through it all. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. Therapy worked wonders for me, but don't just take my word for it. Having someone in your corner to guide you when you're struggling to navigate obstacles can be invaluable. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. With therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you. BetterHelp is a great way to invest in yourself, and BetterHelp has a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Again, that's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Monday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith, back in action after a short hiatus. With me tonight, my co-host, Nick Lee. Thanks as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's get to Saturday's preseason opener. Had to wait a few days. I had a mini moon, not my full honeymoon yet, but a mini moon the last couple days. Finally had an opportunity today to watch the preseason game in full. And even though the Seahawks lost to the Steelers 32-25, preseason final scores at the end of the day don't matter. It's what you see from individual players. And on the offensive side of the football, even with a slow start, Nick, I felt like there was a lot to be excited about. And I think we'd be remiss not to start with the play of Drew Lock. I know he had a fumble at the end of the game that was a costly turnover, but up to that point, he was the quarterback that got the Seahawks back in this football game and in a position to win it. And I just thought you saw the physical tools he brings to the table that, to me, give him an edge over Geno Smith, at least in that capacity. Geno did a good job protecting the football and being the caretaker of the offense, but you saw some of those ooh and ah type plays that Drew Lock is capable of making in this game and really got the offense moving.
Yeah, once again, we saw that in the mock game as well, where the offense just looked a little bit more dynamic with Drew Lock under center. And he's definitely more high risk, high reward. Geno Smith has the higher floor. Drew Lock has the higher ceiling. Which one do you want this year? That's pretty much what it comes down to. Yep. We know what Geno Smith is. He's more or less captain checkdown, which has its time and place for sure. But Drew Lock is a bit more of a gunslinger and has that deep baller, that explosiveness and some athleticism to go with it. And that arm talent, I think, is also there, at least a little bit, and maybe more so than Geno Smith. So it's really, what do you want this year? One of my favorite plays of the preseason game was Drew Lock's fitting in that tight window to Derek Young, that touchdown pass.
Yep.
That was just a great, 5 wide, 3rd and goal in the short. And that's sometimes a tough place to go, a tough place to throw. And he fit into a nice window, put it in a nice place where it could be safely caught. But again, the caveat here is neither quarterback face, TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and all these guys. I read a Football Outsiders article, and they said that the Seahawks quarterbacks face, quote, the future substitute teachers of Allegheny County, unquote. It's what their words, not mine. So don't get mad at me. That is the level of competition that they saw that the Seahawks quarterbacks played. So there is a bit of grain of salt, a little bit of a caveat there. But Drew Lock overall, I thought, brought more to the offense.
Yeah, both quarterbacks had very similar numbers. Lock was 11 for 15, 102 yards. Smith 10 for 15, 101, and he had a rushing touchdown. So I think you saw some moxie from Geno Smith in this game, especially after a couple drives that stalled out. They were moving the ball some, but they just couldn't get past midfield. And then you saw him start to put some points on the board late in the first half. Drew Lock comes in and has a dump off to DJ Dallas that goes for 17 yards for one of his touchdowns. The other one, as you mentioned, to me was the best throw he made. Those throws inside the 5-yard line are really difficult because it's so congested, and yet you could see the arm strength there, and there was some accuracy there to put in a position where Tariq Young was going to be able to catch that ball, not the defender. I thought the defender was in decent position, but again, a really good throw there. So I think that if we're looking at preseason scores, both these guys were playing against backups. To me, it was pretty even in terms of competition they're going up against. Maybe Drew Lock, third and fourth stringers. There's a little bit of a decline there, but these are NFL caliber players you're going against their reserves. And I don't think there was a big difference in competition. So I'm giving Drew Lock the win in this particular game. As you mentioned, the competition's got to be taken into account, but my biggest takeaway from this game on offense, I thought Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas both played really good football. Charles Cross didn't allow a single pressure, and sometimes Pro Football Focus and I disagree on these stats because pressures are subjective. But going back and watching the film a couple times around, there's not even a play that I thought, that might be a pressure. Charles Cross looked like the player he's been advertised to be in pass protection, even if it was against second, third stringers, maybe those future substitute teachers in Allegheny County rushing off the edge. Charles Cross looked like a stud left tackle in pass protection. And Abraham Lucas, what about that pancake to start his NFL career? You had all these questions about his ability to run block coming from Washington State, and all he does is fire out of his three-point stance and just drive a defender into the turf, make him part of the grass. Might have been able to plant some seed with his body, the way he implanted him there. I just thought both guys played fantastic football. I had Lucas down for one pressure allowed. I thought these two looked fantastic. It's just one game. It's the preseason opener. They're going to play a lot better players here in coming weeks, but I think that he took a big step forward. Abraham Lucas did, winning that job at right tackle. And clearly Charles Cross is going to be the starter, but you got to be happy with what you saw from him there.
Yeah, Abe Lucas, I think, got the third highest PFF grade of the day for the Seahawks, 81.5. So, I saw some pancake gifs, pouring the syrup on there on the Seahawks Twitter going on with that. I really like to see that. And I also, obviously it's very encouraging. We really want to see these two rookie tackles. I think we both can agree if those two take a strong hold on the starting positions and move forward, I think that's the most optimal scenario. Jake Curran might have a thing to say or two to say about that on the right side. And also I want to go back to Tariq Young. Just some of the plays he made and getting in position, that touchdown pass by Drew Lock. There's something to be said about the way he kind of angled his body to make that catch and screen and make that touchdown catch. And that just wasn't the only thing. And I was actually watching it at the wedding, or not at the wedding.
I overheard you and Rob both during the wedding.
Yeah, Rob Rang and I are sitting there.
I did what my wife told me to do, and I had my phone up in the suite the entire night to make sure I didn't do it. But yes, I was eavesdropping a little bit while I was talking to people, and you guys were giving tidbits while the wedding was going on.
Yeah, Rob and I were in the corner of the reception. Things have kind of settled down. We're eating dinner, and I got the phone in there, and that play comes on with Drew Lock connecting with Tariq Young. We both look at each other like, dang, that was a good throw. And Tariq Young, okay, all right, kid. And we both started talking about perhaps where he could fit in the future of this lineup at receiver. So Tariq Young, I think, had 4 catches for 30 yards, if I'm not mistaken, touchdown there. Big statement. I think both rookie receivers, Bo Melton, we can get into a little bit later. Both rookie receivers, I thought, showed out well.
Yeah, I think we got to give a shout out to Tariq Young just because he has been one of the constants throughout training camp, and to carry it over into his first preseason game. And I know this Monday night, and I know that I have been gone for the last 4.5 days. So maybe it is not the time and place for me to dish out a hot take, but you know what? To hell with it. I'm going to anyway. This is not saying that D. Eskridge, his time in Seattle is done. Far from it. I think if the kid can get healthy, that he can still be an impact player. But I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. I think Tariq Young has a higher ceiling than D. Eskridge. Now, I think Eskridge has the higher floor. He came into the league as a second-round pick that played at the Senior Bowl. He played at a Division I school. He played some good teams in the Midwest, played some Big Ten schools and put up some big numbers. But Tariq Young is coming from a Division II school. He is bigger at 6'2", 225 pounds. He's almost as fast, a 4'4" guy at that size. He's nearly 2 full years younger. He's a better run blocker. He's got more special teams versatility. I'm starting to wonder, can he run routes better at this point? Because I just haven't seen enough of D. Eskridge on the field. I mean, I think he's played like 6 training camp practices in 2 years. I just haven't had a chance to truly evaluate him. So I'm not saying this to just pile it on D. Eskridge, because I do think that he has big-time talent, but we have not seen it. He can't get on the field. I have been really impressed by what I've seen with Dareke Young. And the thing is, he's a D2 guy that's coming to the NFL. He's got that huge learning curve. And for him to be where he's at now, I think that this is a really big deal for the Seahawks, especially with now Cody Thompson being out of that mix competition-wise. I think Dareke Young has put himself squarely on the right side of the bubble, and it might not even be close at this point. He might be on this football team now already after one preseason game.
Yeah, the emergence of Dareke Young might have doomed JJ Arcega Whiteside before it even began. I mean, unfortunately for him, but yeah.
Well, those two aren't even similar athletic-wise.
No,
I mean, Dareke
no.
Young is a freak, and Arcega Whiteside, he's an average athlete.
Yeah, and it was funny that just the draft pedigree in each one, and one played at Stanford, one didn't play Power 5 or FBS for that matter. Another one I want to touch on quickly, I know you're really excited about this, is DJ Dallas. Holy cow. He is just running with a different, reckless abandon. He had an 18-yard rush, a 17-yard catch, I think 90 total yards. He was just running like an angry man or starving man after a Christmas ham or something.
DJ the bowling ball. That is what he has been all of training camp. And even the practice he got ejected from, which he shouldn't have done what he did. I mean, he blindside hit Bubba Bolden, the undrafted rookie out of Miami. And this was after Bolden helmet to helmet on Travis Homer, his running back teammate. So it was a trio of hurricanes that were involved in this incident. But even that, you can administer the punishment. You're done practicing the rest of the day. But it's like, you just love the mentality that DJ Dallas brings. And I think everybody's kind of forgotten about him because you've got Rashad Penny, and obviously he's dealing with a minor injury right now. It doesn't sound like it's anything significant, but you've got him. You've got Ken Walker III, who they're excited about. But DJ Dallas has been fantastic all of training camp. He's been making big runs every day. He's running with power. He's running with quickness. It looks like there's just a tiny bit more burst. He's never going to be an elite speed guy out of the backfield, but he's fast enough, and he's got that 1-2 when it comes to breaking tackles and physicality. He has come in fantastic shape, and he's also an outstanding receiver, and he's going to continue to make an impact there. Travis Homer's had a good camp too, but I think DJ Dallas has separated himself a bit from his former Miami teammate and current Seahawks teammate. So a really big preseason debut for DJ Dallas. I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the preseason because he and Homer are going to get plenty of carries. Ken Walker III, Rashad Penny. We probably won't see Penny the rest of the preseason, to be honest. They're going to keep him in bubble wrap. Let's make sure he's ready to play the Broncos in week 1. But a lot to be fired up with the way that Dallas ran the football and just that mentality that he plays the game with. We're going to wrap up the show here in a moment with our 3 up, 3 down. And usually we look at offense and defense, but there's so much to take away from this preseason opener that this is going to be strictly offense. We'll do 3 up, 3 down tomorrow on the defensive side of the football. Who are the greatest standouts and which players left something to be desired on Saturday night in the Steel City? We'll get to that here in a moment. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, and combat sports. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Monday edition. Back in the saddle again, I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Joining me for tonight's show, my co-host, Nick Lee. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or watching video form on YouTube. We greatly appreciate it. Let's get to our 3 up, 3 down segment, and we're going to do it on offense today. Defense will be covered on tomorrow's show. I'm going to throw the mic to you first, Nick. You didn't get to do that at my wedding, but I'm going to throw the mic to you here first. Who is the #1 winner in your mind on offense coming out of this first preseason game for the Seahawks?
Well, the #1 winner, I think, just overall, is a guy that has kind of flown on the radar a little bit, unless you've been really paying attention in camp, and that's guard Phil Haynes. Phil Haynes has actually earned, if you are a big Pro Football Focus guy, I know, Corbin, you're kind of hot and cold there, but he actually garnered the highest grade of anyone on the Seahawks during this preseason game, a 90.6. And I was listening to the Softy on 950 earlier, and Hugh Millen was on and said that Phil Haynes looks like a starting guard in the NFL. Just looks like it, looks the part, looks like he's got that it factor, and has really made a step in the right direction this year. And you could see it in the preseason game. Obviously, there's still some learning to do, but he's got enough of that experience, and really with it, health willing. I know that's kind of been the big thing with him. If he can stay healthy and stay on this trajectory, he's going to unseat somebody at the guard position, or at least make one of the two guards, probably Gabe Jackson, very uncomfortable, because he really has looked that good.
Yeah, I think that the fire is slowly creeping up on Gabe Jackson because, and this is not saying that Gabe Jackson has come in and had a bad camp. I think Gabe Jackson looks much better than last year. I think he came in better shape. He had surgery on his knee, and it looks like whatever they corrected has been fixed. They're taking it easy on him workload-wise because he's a veteran. But the Seahawks have been happy with what they've seen. I think he looks good out there. But Phil Haynes maybe has been the best guard the Seahawks have in their roster in training camp in the preseason. I mean, Damian Lewis looks good too. I mean, they've got a lot of talent at that position that really fits what they want to do. But I think Phil Haynes, that basketball background that he has, the movement skills at 322, 325 pounds that Gabe Jackson at this point of his career just does not have. I feel like if you're going to be running a lot of mid-zone, which we know the Seahawks are going to be doing, it's not that Gabe Jackson can't block those plays, because he can. But I feel like your ceiling, especially with a younger guy like Phil Haynes, who hasn't played a lot of NFL snaps, would probably be higher. So, yeah, he's a guy that jumped out to me. I thought the offensive line as a whole, for the most part, played pretty well on Saturday night. And it's a preseason game. You can't put too much stock in it. But Seahawks fans should be, cautiously optimistic about the way that front line played. And there's some good young talent. And I think Phil Haynes has to be included. That I have to put Drew Lock as my big winner. And I know that it's just a preseason game. I know I mentioned earlier the mistake at the end of the game, fumbling away that drive was a killer turnover. But again, you're seeing the upside that Drew Lock brings to the table that Geno Smith simply is not going to bring to your offense. And there's always going to be that, but he might turn around and throw an interception caveat because he is a bit of a riverboat gambler. I have seen improvement already in camp, though, with his decision-making. The practices I've watched, I thought he did a good job of making smart decisions, throwing the football in the preseason game. So you're seeing those improvements. It seems like he's getting the offense down. He gives you the ability to do some things that Geno Smith just isn't going to do. If you want to really protect the football and you want the guy that's more familiar with the offense, then Geno Smith is your guy. But I feel like right now that momentum is starting to change. And at some point, we're going to see a difference on the practice field. Drew Lock they've got to see what he can do with the ones. And maybe this second preseason game, they will let him do that. Maybe he'll play with the first unit. But I think Drew Lock was the big winner from this football game. And I think you and I would both agree. One other big winner, I know you and I both had the same player on our list. We had different guys otherwise. But Bo Melton. I've been very hard on Bo Melton the first couple of weeks just because he hadn't done much in the practice field, and not all of it was his fault. Drew Lock overthrew him in the mock scrimmage. That would have been a 60-plus yard touchdown reception for Bo Melton. He had the corner burned on a plate with butter and syrup. I mean, he had the touchdown catered for Drew Lock, and he just didn't finish off the throw. And there's been a few other times there's been misfires, but he's had issues dropping the football. He did have a drop in this preseason game, but still, he led the team in receiving yards. You can see the athleticism. You can see the ability to move him around the field, the formational flexibility, a better route runner than you would anticipate. Coming from Rutgers, just didn't have the quarterback to throw to him. So I think this was a good stepping stone for him. He hasn't had a great first camp, but maybe he can get momentum out of this, especially with Thompson being hurt now. Maybe both these rookies, Jerick Young and Bo Melton, can make a push for this roster.
Now, my hot take for the night is I think they both will. I really do. I think I'm trying not to put too much stock in one game. And
yeah,
we're all falling victim. We've been starving for football for months and months and months, and we finally get it. We're going to overreact. It's natural. But 23.5 yards per reception doesn't hurt. No. And the first play for Drew Lock in the entire game is a 39-yard reception for Bo Melton. So maybe there's a little chemistry there. And yeah, if I had one critique and from the quarterback situation and how they approached it, I really wish they would alternate drives. I know they want to create some sort of continuity and rhythm, but just with the support staff that both quarterbacks got, a little bit of difference there, and also the difference in competition that they both faced. I did see a few smattering of starters for the Steelers defense. Miles Jack is pretty darn good football player, was out there a little bit. A few other guys. So Geno Smith did face slightly stiffer competition and had slightly better supporting cast around him. But Bo Melton was a guy that shined and took the opportunity. The best you can do, whether you're facing the 3s, the 4s, the starters, whoever, the future substitute teachers of insert county, whatever. The best you can do is take advantage of the situation you're given. And Bo Melton did that.
Let's flip gears here now. 3 ups been covered. Now let's talk 3 down. Players that didn't help their cause in this game. And I'm just outright going to start with a player that I was disappointed with how he played on Saturday night, just because my expectations are through the roof. Given his height, I mean, he should be breaking through the roof at 6'7". But Colby Parkinson, we've got to see what he's doing on the practice field translate to games. I just haven't seen it. And again, 3 targets, 1 catch for 5 yards. Don't put all the blame on him. Obviously, the quarterback's got to get the football to him. But at the same time, it just doesn't seem like he shows up in these games. And I thought his run blocking was subpar in this game. And the Seahawks have been talking him up. He's gained weight. He's gained muscle. He's going to be a well-rounded tight end that we can move around, that can play in line. We can play in the slot. I didn't see that on Saturday night. In the practices, I have seen that. And it's one game, again, like you said, even plus side, you can't take too much stock in one game. Same thing for the negative side. Colby Parkinson could go out and have a great game Thursday night, and we're having a much different discussion. But we have not seen the practice version of Colby Parkinson show up in games. And now with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside coming into town, and if he ends up being a decent tight end for him and gets off to a fast start, there's not going to be any job jeopardy for Colby Parkinson yet. But I mean, at some point, it's put up or shut up. You got to start producing in game situations, and he simply has not done that.
Yeah, Colby Parkinson actually received the 3rd worst Pro Football Focus grade of this game at 53.1, I think it was. So he's got Jimmy Graham size. He does. And it's just, unfortunately, so far he hasn't produced that. Maybe Jimmy Graham is a better athlete, but he has that size. For me, another one that if you've been following me, or if you've been following the shows where I'm on and we talk about offense, you're going to get annoyed. You're going to roll your eyes. The center position. Austin Blythe is a bit down. He didn't have a horrendous game because, he wasn't being blown off the line of scrimmage every time. The offensive line generally had a decent game and included, Austin Blythe in some parts. But one play in particular, I cannot remember the exact situation and when it was. It was a 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, and they tried to run right up the gut. And Austin Blythe was late and whiffed on a block that ended up getting the play completely blown up, and they had to punt. So we can't have that. That's just not something that you want your starting center to do. I understand, there's maybe some blitz timing that the Steelers just made a good play. There's part of that too. But it just didn't look good. He was late to his spot, and the guy that looked like he was supposed to be blocking blew up the play. Now, I wasn't in the headset. I can't really say 100% that was his fault, but the optics didn't look great. And I'm going to be hard on him. I'm going to be hard on him all season because I think the Seahawks have a problem at center. I really do. I feel like sometimes I'm a bit alone in that. I feel like, at least in our circles, we kind of agree, but I haven't seen a lot of outcry otherwise with Austin Blythe. And, he's done some good things, but for me, you got to see more, especially as we're ushering in this new era of Seahawks football. I would love to see them shore up, not just the offensive line, but the spearhead of the offensive line at center.
Well, let's go to the outside because, again, very similar to our 3 up. You and I had different lists except for one player, and that would be Penny Hart on the outside. And I have been an avid supporter of Penny Hart dating back to Georgia State. I think that he's a really good football player. I think he belongs in an NFL roster. But we've mentioned the play of these rookies coming in. Bo Melton just starting to figure things out. Drake Young's been one of the standouts all of training camp in this preseason opener. You're not going to be able to keep more than 5 or 6 receivers. You've got Freddie Swain. You still believe D. Eskridge is going to be back. Maybe this week he's back on the field and you can get him out there for the second preseason game. So with that depth, the talent they have there, Penny Hart has been able to get onto the 53-man roster and play in most of the games the last 2 years. Right now, I think he is on the wrong side of the bubble, and he didn't do anything to help himself out of this game. Had 2 catches for 3 yards on 3 targets. And he's been pretty quiet most of training camp too. And that has been a big difference from the last 2 years. I think the main reason he's been on this football team the last 2 years, He has consistently been a great practice player. I can count on one hand the number of times that I've been like, Penny Hart made that catch there. He just hasn't been involved in the offense much in camp. Some of it's been those new additions getting opportunities. It just feels like he is going to have to really pick it up here to get back on the right side of the bubble for the 53-man roster. He's not doing a ton on special teams either right now. And he's been a good special teams player for the last couple of years. Maybe that's going to help him stay on this roster. But right now, with the emergence of those rookies and the veterans they already have in the roster that we know are surefire going to be on this football team, there's a lot of pressure on him right now. And he might be entering that area where it's going to be difficult for him to get back on the 53-man roster.
It will be. It will be difficult. And that one play where it was a bubble screen that just got destroyed. And I think he had started off one catch for -3 yards or something like that. In the back of my mind, I'm like, I hope he gets another target because I would hate to finish the game with minus receiving yards. But yeah, it's so much. It's been a little bit of him being quiet, and also the infusion of talent at receiver. He kind of starting to get knocked down a couple pegs with just some of the experience and some of the guys they brought in. He's always been first team all preseason, all training camp, which is not a knock. That's great. You want those guys on your roster. But this year, less so. And with the amount of guys they have in the room that are uber talented and technical and working hard along with him, it's going to get tougher and tougher.
When you're one of those players that's a fringe player, and that is not a knock on a player in the NFL. If you're somebody that's hung around for several years, most players don't do that when they come into the NFL. Penny Hart's already done more than most players that come into the league, but he is a fringe player. He's a guy that's always battling for that roster spot. He's not a cement, lock him in kind of guy. You can't be a player like that and have an average training camp, especially when there's two rookies that come in that are draft picks at your position and they do good things. The chances of you beating those players out is not good. And with the other players there, again, I'm a big Penny Hart fan. I think that he's a fantastic player. I think he belongs on an NFL roster. I just don't know at this point. I don't think he's done enough to be able to secure a spot for a third season in a row in the Seahawks in that receiving core. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at NickLee51. Check out Locked On Seahawks on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and streaming 5 days a week on YouTube. Coming up on our Tuesday episode, I'll be rejoined by Rob Rang. We'll continue our coverage of Saturday's preseason opener on the defensive side of the football. Some key takeaways, including an explosive debut for Boye Mafe and a couple of other rookies for the Seahawks. And we'll also be doing 3 up, 3 down on the defensive side of the football. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thanks for listening in. Go Hawks.